All right, we're going to get kicked off here. So for those of you that have recently joined, once again, my name is John Lynn. I'm a recruiting manager at Birchworks. For those of you that aren't familiar with Birchworks, we're a recruiting firm focused 100% in the data science, analytics, data engineering, and then research and insight space. Been around for about 10 years, but this is all about our new group that we're promoting, the Analytics Enthusiast Group. And the plan for this is to bring together analytics, data science, marketing research professionals to really share ideas, insights, perspectives with others through a thought leadership community. So this is our first installment of the webinar series. We're so excited to have Kathleen Maley here today and Katie Ferguson to walk us through, establishing a Greenfield analytics function within your organization. If you have any interest in being involved in the Analytics Enthusiast Group a little bit more than just being an attendee in the future, please feel free to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can send an email to analyticsenthusiasts@birchworks.com. So let's get over to our main event today. First, we have Katie Ferguson, who is a professional data science and analytics recruiter with Birchworks. She has close to 15 years experience focused in that space. And something that's pretty amazing, just over the course of the last 5 years alone, she's placed almost 100 analytics and data science professionals at organizations across the country. So lots of experience there, very knowledgeable of the market and kind of what's going on and the trends that have developed in the space. Then we also have Kathleen Maley, who is a seasoned analytics leader with over 15 years experience in various quantitative roles. She holds her master's in applied statistics from the University of Michigan and has been running her own analytics practice for the last 2 years. Prior to that, she held executive roles at KeyBank and Bank of America, helping those organizations build out and lead their analytics organizations. She also currently serves as a member of the Analytics Expert Network for the IIA. So with that introduction, ladies, really excited to hear what you have for us today, and I'll turn it over to you two.
Thanks, John. Again, Katie Ferguson here. Nice to meet everyone. I've actually known Kathleen over the course of my analytics recruiting career, but never have had the pleasure to present with her. So super excited. And we both realized that we're both named Kathleen and we both have red hair. So you're in good hands. And we probably would have never noticed this without COVID and a Zoom video. So excited to present with you. So I thought I'd kind of kick it off with a simple question to start. So what is Greenfield Analytics function? And then kind of when has it gained popularity? I feel like it's gained popularity maybe over the last 5 or 6 years, but you tell me if I'm wrong there. So I'll let you take it away.
So it's interesting, and let me start by acknowledging Birchworks. So Katie knows this, but for everyone else, Birchworks has been an incredibly valuable partner to me, not only as a client, but on a personal level, because I learned about Birchworks very, very early on in my career. And some of the most valuable resources I've ever come across as an analytics professional has come from Birchworks. I still use them today. So, it's also—
thank you.
It's absolutely true. It's very personally rewarding for me to be here today, to be engaged with Birchworks in a different way at a different level, and to be giving back to the community, because we are a very special community. So with that said, let me jump into what is a Greenfield analytics function. And I think it is not actually, it's a simple question to ask. It's never a simple question to answer. And I'll start by saying, I will give a version of an answer that I think covers a lot of ground, but the reality is there's a slightly different version of the answer for every single organization that's ever undertaken it. But I think of a Greenfield analytics in terms of an organization. Typically how analytics will grow up at an organization is organically. A leader here hires a couple of analysts, a leader there hires a couple of analysts. They start to see, hey, we're at some kind of critical mass. We've got a bunch of different people doing a bunch of different data work. Maybe there's some modeling thrown in. At some point, there's a critical mass that's reached. And somebody says, we've got this federated model. I would typically call it at that stage fragmented right? There hasn't been any coordination yet. And they say, we need to start inserting some organization, some strategy, some set of common best practices. We got to start looking, are there efficiencies? Are there more and better questions we can answer if we start working across silos? That is where we start to go from this sort of organic fragmented model to, okay, Greenfield analytics. This is the first time we're going to stop, we're going to pause, and we're going to think about what it is we're really trying to achieve and how we're going to go about doing that. I'd also like to just throw in a side comment here. Generally speaking, if your analytics people are operating in a fragmented model, almost certainly your data are also fragmented. What's very interesting about this space, though, is when you are working on data and organizing your data without also thinking about the analytics strategy, it's going to be very hard to generate realized value from that effort. It's absolutely necessary, but it is insufficient in and of itself to produce value. But when you start working on your analytics strategy, how are we going to use this data? You can still make progress even if your data are still siloed. You can start to actually realize revenue at that stage. So there's this interesting difference between fragmented analytics and fragmented data. It is possible to create a virtuous cycle, but I think it's one directional. And that's why today I'm going to focus mainly on analytics strategy and people side of things. There's still huge effort in a data space and creating a data lake and organizing your data, but I'm going to separate those two and say that's a good topic for another day.
We might take you up on that.
Okay.
So I guess kind of why is this all happening? Could you maybe start there, kind of jump in there?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons we're talking about this Greenfield analytics space a little bit differently than we have in years past is because I'm going to say we're about 2 decades into this journey. And I say that because that fits my personal timeline. I think about when Tom Davenport wrote his book, Competing on Analytics. That was in 2007. I think that was a pivotal point for many of us who work in this space. I just happened to be working at Bank of America at the time. Bank of America picked up on this book, picked up on this theory, and started down this path. But here we are, I'll say 2 decades, 15 years later in my career, and 85% of data initiatives, of data science initiatives, of analytics initiatives still fail to produce business value. The data projects may be completed, the models might be completed, but now we're looking and saying, okay, great, I have the model, but what am I getting for the model? These initiatives are failing to produce business value. So if we don't start saying, okay, good, we've come a long way, but we're not there yet, and start thinking about how we organize analytics functions differently, we will continue to see an 85% failure rate. So I think we are at another pivotal point, and it's about taking that next, last big step that crosses the divide from data to business value.
A question for you, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but how do you know that 85% number? I knew the number was high, but where's that stat from?
And in all honesty, I've seen everything from 80% to 90%. So I've read this. Okay. I follow, Tom's work still. Tom still does a lot of writing. And I've seen a Gartner report that has the 85%. So these are a pretty consistent metric that I've seen in various research for the last 3 years. So that's the other concern for me personally, is the number's not changing. If I were a business leader and I was dumping all this money into data and analytics and I was seeing an 85% failure rate, I would start to ask myself, is there a there? Is this really something that we can do? I question it, and they are beginning to question it more harshly, perhaps, than they have in the past. I think we're losing a little bit of the whole trust me, and that's why I think conversations like this are so important, because we absolutely can get there if we can get out in front of some of these concerns quickly enough.
Okay. I'm looking at some questions coming in, but I might wait for a few of those at the end because I'm nervous you might cover some things. So can you talk a little bit about kind of why is this a problem in the first place and how it relates to maybe the typical data scientist? You know, and when I say typical, just, you know what I mean by that, like someone that's been working in data science from zero to the last 15 years. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is where I've gotten really, really excited about what I specialize now around analytics strategy. So I started as an analyst. I started in predictive modeling. I am a statistician, so that is my lean, right? I am the person who comes in and says, great, I can help you with your data. And we have been promising this for a long time. If you just work with us, we're going to make you millions and millions of dollars. But this is really one problem, but it's two sides of the same, I should say, opportunity. Typically, data scientists like me are never taught to be useful in a business setting. So in my day, we were statisticians. We went to school, we learned statistics. Now you see a lot of business analytics programs. There's a big focus on algorithms. There's a big focus on programming, still some focus on statistics, but there's never any discussion about, okay, great, now you're going to go and you're going to work with someone who's known absolutely nothing about this space. Go and be useful. So I had no idea what I was doing when I started. Most analysts do not. Business leaders are on the other side of that coin, and they've been told, you've got to get into data and analytics. If you don't start using your data, you're going to fall behind. Your business is going to fail. You're going to be overrun by your competitors. And yet they have absolutely no personal experience or frame of reference for working with analytics teams and for integrating data into decision making. And so what we see are these two separate groups of really, really smart people who have no way of connecting, of communicating, of working together.
And I have a personal example of this, and I've used this on a couple of our webinars or when I've done talks before, but I have a good friend, and he shall remain nameless, and he worked for a large company in Chicago that made macaroni and cheese. And he was more an MBA brand type, but with a financial background, you know, definitely on the financial background. And he went to, and this is probably 10 years ago, he went to 10 years ago, he went to his analytics and pricing team and said, we are launching a new organic boxed macaroni and cheese. And he said, what can I price this at? You know, simple business question. You guys, here's all the data, here are the numbers. What can we price this at? So simple box of macaroni and cheese with an organic label. And they came back to him, you know, after several weeks, lots of analysis, and they said, well, you can price this at $18.73 a box. And that's when he said, oh my gosh, like there's a big disconnect here. So it's a simple example, but, you know, that's like, you know, what friends and family sometimes share with me. So there is a disconnect there for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, the great thing is, right? And I believe this in every situation. Once we can name a problem, we can begin to solve the problem. Now, there's been talk around we don't speak the same language. There's some of that. But this is not a problem of, did I put a p-value on the page or did I not? It is much more fundamental than that. But if I can name the problem, I can solve the problem. And that's where we are now. We can solve this problem. And that's what I've spent the last several years of my professional career doing, is developing those tools that will get us there.
Great. Under what circumstances do you see this develop?
So the problem, I would say, is pretty prevalent, right? The problem of, we've got these analytics groups popping up, we've got people here and there, and we're not really connecting as well as we should. We're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. That's pretty prevalent, really. It's in all industries, all segments, all markets, even tech and digital native. And you know, there are some really, really big, I have friends all over. I've got some friends at some really big name companies that you would know if they, you know, knocked on your door this afternoon. even within those companies, they are not always great at using the data, because even for digital native companies, creating data isn't the same thing as using data. And using data for operational decisions isn't the same thing as using operational data to make decisions around staffing, or make decisions around client experience, right? Or product pricing. So there are all of these things that come together. It starts to get noisy once people start to notice we've got a critical mass. What is happening? So the problem will exist long before people start recognizing it or feeling it. The problem is in that nascent stage. And who's to say when a solution that was right at a certain time outgrows itself, and, or I should say the other, right? The organization continues to evolve, and what was a good solution at one time no longer is. And so it's finding that space on that maturity curve to say, this approach used to serve us well. It no longer does. It's time to start evolving and making some changes.
When do you think is the right time to establish this?
I mean, I love that question, because you know, an organization can wait until the CFO says, do we really need all these people? What are they doing anyway? They're costing us this much. What are we getting for it? And that's when a lot of companies go, oh, we better start thinking about this. And then they'll talk about centralizing, and then they'll start talking about efficiencies and all sorts of things along those lines. But for a business leader who's perhaps listening today or thinking about the future, even within my own business unit, I've hired a few people. Am I really getting what I think I could be getting out of this person, this analyst that I've hired, who may or may not know how to really be useful as a thought partner? Am I going further than just asking for data and reporting? Because of course, as a business leader who's probably not trained as a data scientist, how do you even know what potential is out there? Am I frustrated because my analysts are giving me 50 pages of summarized data instead of maybe being proactive? I hear that a lot. I want my analysts to be proactive. How do we help them be proactive? Another one, and this is actually my favorite because it often is lost in the shadows. Am I looking at the intersections between my business and the business next door, the line of business, my partner within the same company? Because there's a ton of opportunity that lives in that intersection between two lines of business. And while that's good for the organization as a whole, it's almost always good for each of those individual business leaders as well. So that's another really important time to think, do I need to start thinking more holistically about our data and analytics strategy so that we can capture that opportunity that resides in that middle ground between two lines of business?
Great, great. Let me jump in. There's a good question that just came in that I think is perfect to jump in here. As an analytics professional, how can I increase my knowledge of the business to be more effective in producing ROI on my projects?
This is
a mouthful, but that's a great question. Yeah.
It's a beautiful question. And actually, you know, I don't know if I can answer that question to the extent I would like to in this session. I have done a lot of that work because that was a huge part of up-leveling my own team, helping my analysts be effective. But in short, I would recommend a couple of things. Number one, an analyst can only be useful when an analyst is really integrated in a line of business strategy. And so see if you can get yourself invited to staff meetings. See if you can get yourself invited to team meetings. See if you can get yourself invited to all hands. If you have one good friend within that organization you're supporting, talk to them about this stuff. Take the risk of being vulnerable and saying, hey, I want to do a better job for you. I can only do that if I start working in a slightly different way. I think that looks like this. Will you help me do that? Will you be open to working with me in a different way so that I can do more good for you? And when it comes to calculating ROI, this is actually quite simple. And it's basically a business case, right? What is the business trying to achieve? What assumptions are they going to make? One of the tricks I love is, if I could increase your sales by 1%, what does that look like? If I could decrease your cost by 1%, what does that look like? And all of a sudden we start to get these orders of magnitude. We can't know actual value until the work is done. But we have to be able to estimate potential value before we've done the work. Otherwise, we will waste our time on a whole bunch of things.
Let me jump in there too from a recruiting standpoint here. I think as an analyst looking to join a company, they should look for a mentor that can mentor them from an analytics standpoint, statistics, machine learning, data science, but also from a business standpoint. And sometimes those are two separate people. And sometimes you may follow that, even if the person leaves the organization, you may continue to ping them and ask them for questions. So once you find anyone that can mentor you and guide you, keep that relationship established would be my kind of piece of advice, because, throughout your career, you're going to come in contact with different people and different businesses. And you're always going to want advice, whether it's statistics or business. So make sure to, when looking at a job, to make sure you're looking at that as a critical piece of the puzzle, not just like, oh, I love the projects or I love this, but think about the mentorship from a business and statistical standpoint.
I think that's absolutely right advice. I think that's excellent. And, frankly, I often think of it in terms of, even if my goal is to learn the business or learn the business strategy, which is more specific to an individual team and an individual company, when I'm doing that relationship building, I think of it in terms of making a friend. Because once that person's become my friend, I can talk to them much more openly. I can ask them for favors. I can expect them to ask me favors in return. And so, yes, sure. I want to learn the business, but I got to first make my friend who's willing to talk to me about it. Go out for coffee and get to know each other. Do virtual drinks over Zoom that we've been doing for, that doesn't always come naturally to analysts, but we've got to do a better job doing that kind of thing. Correct.
Yes, that's a piece of advice I always give is network. Yes, and try to keep those relationships up. Because yes, I do feel data scientists, predictive analytics professionals, that is one thing they always need to continue to work on, whereas some of their counterparts, that just comes way too naturally to them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, hold on, we have one other question I want to pop in here. What areas of the data do you dive into to start quantifying the value to correcting it with a data management team?
Ooh, if I understand the question, this is really, how do I start to study my data to monetize the negative, I shouldn't say to monetize, to quantify the impact of dirty data, right?
Correct.
I mean, honestly, my biggest piece of advice is, yes, IT will have to be very, very involved in fixing it. But at the end of the day, IT isn't the primary beneficiary of clean data, and they're not the primary sufferer when it's bad data. Everything for me comes back to the business, because only the business is responsible for creating value, right? So if there's no P&L, we're just operating in a different realm. And so again, my relationships with business leaders is absolutely critical, because I can go to them and say, hey, look, I've got this issue with my data, and it could be we spend this much time fixing it. We have this proportion of cells are empty, and therefore I can't make this automated decision on this number of clients in the portfolio, whatever it is. And I go to them and I say, if I had this data, then my models would be this much better and I could make you this much more money. Will you help me have a conversation with IT? Will you help me have a conversation with your boss to ask for funding to fix this? Because we've also got funding models in there. I mean, if people had unlimited time, they would do absolutely everything they could, but none of us does. Everything is about funding and resource allocation. So yes, first we value it, but then it's about having the right conversation with the right people, not because IT isn't, is just choosing not to, or they're not paying attention, but because they have a responsibility to do the things that are of primary importance to the business. And so we've got to make sure we loop that into the conversation.
Can you share a little bit about the last several years and kind of what you've been doing personally? That would, I think, be really helpful to the audience to hear.
Absolutely. So like I said, I started as a statistician. I fell in love with business analytics, which I think I generally equate business analytics with discovery analytics, right? And that's when a business leader comes and says, hey, I just spent $7 million to improve this contact center. Can you help me show that it was the right decision? And you go, oh, I don't know where first of all, you go, well, was it the right decision? Like, let's figure that out. But then it's like, yeah, where are we starting with this? One of my favorite questions was, hey, Kathleen, what's going to be the impact of the government shutdown? I don't know, let's figure that out. So it's just big, broad, open-ended questions. And, sometimes, anyway, it's just a very, very open space, but everything starts with that. The last few years, because I ran my own P&L, my last job at Bank of America was running my own P&L. The last piece of the puzzle fell into place for me in terms of how to make analytics valuable to an organization. My focus up until then had been elevating my own teammates, giving them the missing consulting skills that they needed if they were going to be effective with the business. But because I was the operational leader as well in that case, I realized how much I needed to know about data and analytics to be able to integrate it into my business process. In order for me to take advantage of my new price elasticity and optimization models, I had to do a ton of work operationally. And it dawned on me that for the last, I'll call it the 10 years before that, my entire focus had been on my own analytics team and helping them modernize, helping them become thought partners and consultants so that they could bring their data science skills to bear for the organization. I gave the organization we were supporting almost no time and attention in terms of what they needed to do to incorporate these solutions in their operations. And it hit me and I thought, well, that's kind of unfair. We keep producing all of these wonderful things and then we wonder why the business isn't using it. We know it's aligned to their strategy, but did anybody ever tell them how to work with us? Did anybody ever tell them that if I do a week's worth of work, it's going to be 6 weeks of work for you in terms of business change management? What is going to be involved in the back end in terms of performance monitoring? And so that was where I really got into where I am now in terms of analytic strategy. So I think of analytic strategy very, very holistically. It's about the right talent. It's about upskilling and training on both sides. It's about an operating model. It's about an engagement framework. It's about a prioritization framework that is within business unit, across business unit, and at the enterprise level, really putting an explicit, defined purpose to the organization and making sure, to the analytics function, and making sure that this is really what the line of business wants to get out of it. So much better communication and much clearer expectations on both sides, what it looks like when it's operating well, and what we can achieve when we choose this new way of working.
Question for you. What industries do you see this kind of most in? I mean, I would just assume it would be a startup or maybe a company that is a little more innovative. But I mean, you've worked for banks for several years, so I'd love to hear your take on that and just kind of maybe the evolution of this over industries over the last several years.
Yeah, and I will say the one that I'm obsessed with right now and the one I am most excited about right now is healthcare and biotech, very broadly. So think about healthcare insurance, think about large healthcare systems that are now thinking in terms of accountable care, meaning we don't do a bunch of stuff and then charge you what it costs. We say, for this price, we will solve this problem. Now, if we solve it more efficiently, we're going to keep more margin. And if you end up back in the hospital, we're going to be out of pocket. We're going to have negative margin. And so it's the first time where large healthcare systems are really the value prop for the healthcare system is in alignment with better patient outcomes. I mean, it's an incredibly exciting thing to see taking off. Pharma is now looking at real world analytics. They're good with clinical trials. They've been doing that a long time. Same thing with other biotech. They haven't thought about, okay, but what does this drug do when it's out in the real world? How can we use that to do better pricing? How can we do that to have better conversations with insurance companies that they should cover a certain treatment? So there is just this explosion of awareness within healthcare that they are underutilizing their data. Again, healthcare systems, a woman goes in and delivers a child, they've captured that prenatal care. Well, why aren't they thinking about lifetime care, meaning they capture the pediatric care for that child? We do that in banking all the time, right? We think about the client life cycle. When you're first entering your life, you need a checking account. Eventually, you need a credit card. You're probably going to buy a house at some point down the road. Exactly that model fits within healthcare. So this I think is a huge space. It's exploding, and I think we're going to see just massive maturation and evolution within the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. Yes. Thank you. When I was talking to a few people today, or just over the last several weeks about this, and I typically work with people kind of in the 0 to, we'll say, 10 years of their career. So, telling them, oh, you got to check this out. This is what we're presenting on. I kind of put together a couple questions they gave me, but basically the few people I spoke to were saying, they're I'm going to say junior, kind of 0 to 6 years of experience in data science, and kind of how, I'm losing my train of thought here. Hold on. Let me, what would your advice be hold on, let me read this out. What would your advice be to the junior data science who feel they can't just walk up to their leaders and say, like, what's happening with our organization or something like that?
Yeah. So first of all, congratulations.
I know it's a big question, but I kind of put a few things together. You think you know where I'm going with this? Okay.
I love it. I love it. And let me say congratulations on your intuition, because you're right. You can't just walk up to the big head honcho and be like, how come you guys aren't doing it right? Or how come it's so difficult? Or how come, you're right. You can't do that. So I'll think of it in a couple of different ways. So first of all, each of us sees typically the world from our own perspective, right? And that's why for me, being in that P&L role was so valuable, because all of a sudden I could see the job. I could see how I would ingest analytics from the perspective of a business leader. So the first thing I'm going to say is I want to acknowledge that what we're asking these business leaders to do, what these decision makers are up against, is really, really difficult. Imagine them as early seafarers. Everyone is telling them there's something across the ocean. They can't see it. They only know how to craft a boat that's going to be on their nice, gentle river. And they're being told, you got to get across that ocean. You got to get across that ocean. And they hired a couple of guys who, can build a few oars and, and they're just saying, let's go for it. Let's go for it. They don't know what sea monsters are out there. They don't know if their boat's going to survive it. They don't, or equally wrong, they're absolutely sure they know how to build a boat and nobody's going to tell them any different. That's equally troublesome. But, even when you hit land, right? You land in the Bahamas and you don't know that Venezuela is out there. So how do you even know when you've made successful landfall? It is an incredibly difficult space. So the first thing I always bring is empathy, right? The second thing, and this is where I was, I'll call it again, when I was in my first 10 years, right? Grassroots. I took a very grassroots approach. I knew, given where I was in the organization, that I couldn't change everything, but I knew I could change the way things worked for the business partner to whom I was aligned. And I put a lot of energy into that. The things that I know now that I try to teach others through forums like this and other events are the things I learned through trial and error. I made a ton of mistakes. I got some bruises along the way. I recovered from all of them, obviously. But I decided, I know there's a better way to do this. What I'm doing isn't working. I'm going to try something else. And so that's why, again, building those relationships, having those conversations. And what eventually happens is all of a sudden people start to see my space is looking a little different. Now I get a little bit broader scope of responsibility. Now there's a little bit more change and a little bit more change. And eventually these two pieces, we hope, will meet. bottom-up, grassroots, top-down leadership and funding and investment. But if you are where you are, and so my advice always is do the very best with the hand you've been dealt. You can actually, even if you can't make a massive change immediately at the enterprise level, you can change the way things work for you and your business partner.
I like that. And I love your analogies, by the way. I love it. It's great. Is there anything we didn't cover? Anything just that you want to make sure we cover today before we get to a few more Q&A?
I would love to jump into questions. I'm sure things will hit me, but I would love for this to be as relevant as possible for our listeners here.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go to the audience here. Okay. What are the critical roles organizations should hire to be effective with analytics from the start?
Okay. I love this question because, again, who is typically making these decisions? The people have no frame of reference for what's actually going to work. Fantastic. So my advice to leaders who are taking this holistic approach, who are saying to themselves, we're investing a lot of money, what are we getting for it? Start with leadership. And when I say analytics leadership, it isn't necessarily the guy with a PhD in statistics. It also isn't necessarily with a guy who knows everything there is to know about the business, but has never worked as a data scientist. This is a very unique and special area in which we work. There is a combination of technical skills, and I think it's very, very hard to lead data scientists as somebody who doesn't speak their language. So I think having somebody with some technical background is critical.
Could not agree more. And I've seen that over the years. I've seen the changes, when I first started recruiting in analytics, kind of going back to 2007 about I remember like telling my friends and family what I was recruiting for, and people didn't even know what it was, so I mean, to be honest, now data science is, a common term and everybody knows what data science is. So I've seen the evolution where, the statisticians, as we used to call them, were in the back room, and not talking with business leaders. And we've seen that gap, change. And so, yes, I think you have to be able to speak the language, but you also have to have the business acumen as well. And sometimes maybe, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but maybe depending on the organization, they have to marry the skill set, so to speak. They have to find maybe a combination or something that will work for that group.
I think you're absolutely right. Ideally, you would find this combination of skills within one person. But
one person.
Incredibly rare. It's incredibly rare. I happen to be a statistician. Frankly, I'm not the best statistician. I've got people working for me who, have PhDs, who are way more advanced, and they've been doing it consistently for the last 15 years. They're like, I haven't written a line of code in a long time, but I know enough to be able to really have meaningful conversations about what they're working on, and to remind them, you are 80% of the way there. We need to start monetizing on your solution. We will come back and extract any additional value that we can. But that's where the business mindedness comes in. It's not about the model. It never is. It's about the money the business can make now that they have the model. And so it's being able to consult with business leaders, being able to really understand what it is they're trying to solve, being able to talk to them about the problems they're trying to solve. So if you can find that in one person, you're very, very fortunate.
Yes.
If you can't, it's really important to hire these skills and to know that you're hiring them as a team, which means they're going to have to be able to work together, and they have to know that they are both being hired to complement each other. And that, so then you got to figure out what's right for you. Who sits in the top spot? Who's supportive? Are they peers? What is that going to look like? But it needs to be very deliberate, and it needs to be very open.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Another question. What are the pros and cons to a centralized versus a decentralized data management team? They kind of said, not sure if this is your area of expertise, but wanted to get your thoughts.
I think it's a brilliant question, and I really appreciate the acknowledgement that it may not be, because I think of data and data management as very, very different from analytics. So I will share what in terms of, again, the structure doesn't solve the problem. The structure might be an enabler to solving the problem. So think of it this way. Typically, and I did this in my last job, I was hired to centralize an analytics function. That made a lot of sense in that instance, because I needed to be able to evolve the analytics team more quickly. And so having, I'll use the phrase, direct control gave me much more ability to influence change. I was asking my team to do some very, very, very difficult things. Had they reported elsewhere, I could have still led that change, but I wouldn't have had nearly the amount of influence to make that change as quickly. When I think about data management, again, it's not my area of expertise, but I typically think of what problem are we trying to solve? If we're talking about tech, if we're talking about we want our data to flow, we want to be able to get to the data we need, I can see a benefit of having a centralized function. But if we're talking about data governance and data quality, there's going to have to be some specialization to line of business, because that's how we're going to know what that data means. So whether that individual, that role of making sure there's connection to the operational and the specialized knowledge for the business, whether that individual sits within the centralized function or sits decentralized, I think is less of a question, as long as there's very clear agreement on the roles and responsibilities and the why we're doing it this way. I think it can always work both ways, as long as we're really deliberate and clear about what it is we're trying to solve and why we think this is the better way to set it up.
Okay, great. No, thank you for that. Okay, how about one last question? We'll close with this question. Okay, as an organization who is struggling with this topic, what is one change we can try to start putting into effect tomorrow, or I guess right away, to help course correct us down the right path? I like that question.
It's a great question. And I'm going to say communication. Now, whether that means your analysts are sitting off to a corner, because again, most leaders have no frame of reference for analytics. They think analytics is this thing that happens over there, and if they were good enough, they would just sort of magically produce value and it would appear and it would be one, but it doesn't work that way. So they're not integrated into staff meetings, integrated into strategic discussions. Their ability to help is going to be limited. Caveat, putting them in those situations doesn't guarantee success. So if they believe that their job, if they have been trained explicitly or implicitly that their job is to get the data, they will wait for you to tell them what data to get. So just because you put them in that situation may not actually be enough. They may not also need the training that says, hey, your job isn't about getting the data anymore. Your job is about helping to solve a business problem. And so you need to be listening for where data comes into play, and you need to let us know when you can help us with this problem. That is a huge change for a lot of analysts, but it comes down to, again, communication. Open the box, know that nobody most likely if you're in this situation, analysts don't know how to be consultants and business leaders don't know how to engage with analysts. It's about opening up that communication.
I like that a lot. Yes. All right. Well, Kathleen, it was so fun. I hope the audience thought it was fun too. Yes, and appreciate you taking the time. John, are we going to post this maybe tomorrow as well? Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So this session was recorded. So if you want to share it with anybody or send it out, you can check the Birchworks website, and we'll have that on our YouTube channel, I believe. But I just want to say thank you so much, both Kathleen and Katie. This was phenomenal. Really appreciate you taking the time to put this together. And thank everybody that joined, and I hope you really enjoyed the first installment of our Analytics Enthusiast webinar series. I would be hard pressed if I didn't put a small plug in. Our next webinar will be towards the latter half of May. We're still finalizing a final date, but it'll be with on the topic of sports analytics and really kind of the evolution of it, both in the past and how it's continuing to evolve moving forward. So we'll have a panel of individuals with experience, in collegiate athletics, in professional athletics, professional sports, and all of that. So it should be really, really exciting. But thank you everybody again for coming out. Thank you so much, Kathleen and Katie. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Wednesday.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.